have a start now in the second repechage of the fours. Hopefully it'll be just as exciting as that previous one. Ohio State, Minnesota, Yale, Washington, and Notre Dame. Washington had a very strong four, and they won the Pac-10 championships. That same crew is here intact, and they are the early leaders, about 150 meters into the race. Going strongly with them, though, right next to them is the crew from Yale, from New Haven, Connecticut. So it's Washington and Yale out in front early on. Ohio State is in third. Fourth place is Minnesota, and fifth place is Notre Dame. The fourth and fifth place crews, though, are about one length behind your lead group of three. So it's very close between Washington, Yale, and Ohio State. Minnesota in fourth, about a length behind them, and now 2 more seats back to Notre Dame. Well, Washington was out early, but now Yale, much like their first 8 that we saw in the first race of the day, is starting to dominate. They've gone out to a 2-seat advantage. They're rowing at 36 and a half strokes per minute, and they're continuing to move on Washington. Washington is still holding on to second place. That's certainly plenty good to get them into the grand final. They're rowing just about a beat or a beat and a half lower than Yale at 35 strokes per minute. Ohio State is in third, but Minnesota, a familiar foe for them, is starting to challenge Ohio State. Minnesota continues in fourth, Notre Dame is in fifth. Through the 500-meter mark, it's Yale with about 4 seats over Washington. Washington, in turn, has about 2 or 3 seats over the Ohio State Buckeyes, then another 2 or 3 seats back to the Minnesota Golden Gophers, and then we go back to the Notre Dame Fighting Irish in fifth. Well, right now, the first 2 crews, Yale, Washington, and Ohio State and or Minnesota, they're going to need to do some work to challenge those 2 crews, or else it's going to be straight into the grand final for Yale and Washington. Yale already, of course, has open water over third, fourth, and fifth place. They don't quite yet have a full boat length over Washington. Washington has almost a full boat length over Ohio State. But as I described that, Minnesota has just taken third place away from Ohio State. So Minnesota, again, showing strength here in the middle 1,000. They've gone into third. The question becomes, can they claw their way back up into second and make it into the grand final? 36 strokes per minute, give or take a beat, seems to be the predominant stroke rate. Minnesota's at 36. Yale's move has gotten them almost a full length over Washington. It's more of sort of an extended move, or just that's how much faster they're going stroke per stroke than the rest of the crews. And they now have a full length for the first time. Still just over 1,000 meters to go. Yale has a full length for the first time over Washington. Washington has 3/4 of a length over the relatively new third place crew, Minnesota. Minnesota 4 seats over Ohio State. In turn, they have about 2 seats over Notre Dame. Through the halfway point, and about 3 minutes and 37 seconds, that would be Yale. Yale's looking very strong here. They have open water over Washington. Washington is maybe losing, an inch or 2 every few strokes to Minnesota, but they still have 3/4 of a length, somewhere between 3/4 and half a length. Again, it's a little bit difficult here in the bow cox environment. The Washington coxswain, I see her looking over her left shoulder. She just got a real good look at the Minnesota crew, and she's telling her crew exactly where they are and exactly what they need to do to hold on to second place. So that's a good piece of coxing. She saw what they need to do. She probably is figuring, well, Yale might be out of touch today. Let's make sure we get a chance at them tomorrow by holding off the Golden Gophers of Minnesota over in lane 2. So it's Washington now only half a length ahead of Minnesota. Minnesota doing a good job of just sort of gradually coming back. They have about 700 meters left to finish off that comeback and go through Washington. It's going to be a little bit disconcerting for Washington if Minnesota can put on one more big move where they do something, get 2 seats. That's going to be hard to respond to. This inching back inching back. That's something that a crew can handle. It's not taking Washington out of their comfort zone. In fact, if anything, Washington is moving back out. Washington's moving back out a little bit on Minnesota. In the process, they've gone from a little bit of open water down on Yale back to bow to stern. Yale's under no danger here, but they still have to watch out for Washington if they want to win, and Washington has done a good job with now 500 meters to go for your leader of staving off that long, sustained push by Minnesota. So Minnesota, good job to bring it back to almost only a half a length deficit, but the Washington has stretched it back out. They've never gotten a full length over Minnesota. They still don't have it. And it looks like here comes one more charge from Minnesota. It is Notre Dame back in 4th place and Ohio State in 5th, but they're open water behind the lead 3 crews. Well, Yale has responded in kind, back out to a bit of open water over Washington. Washington, 3/4 of a length. They just took a little bit of a rough stroke there and lost about a seat of that lead, but they recovered immediately. It was only one bad stroke. Let's see, though, if that changes the momentum in favor of Minnesota or not. No, not really. Washington recovered great from that. We're coming up with about 300 meters to go. Minnesota's going to have to really jack up the stroke rate, do something, or just like in the last scenario, we're going to see a good, well-fought race that's going to fall just a little bit short. Okay, so we have Yale has been your leader almost throughout. Washington has a little bit of overlap on them, so they're gaining, and in the process, they're going to hold off Minnesota, apparently. We're coming up to the last 100 meters now, and it continues to be Yale in 1st, Washington in 2nd, Minnesota in 3rd. Can Minnesota mount one last charge? Here they go up in stroke rating yet again. Washington just popped the stroke rating up. Washington's doing a great job of controlling their 2nd place position. And unofficially looks to be Yale, Washington, and Minnesota in that order. Brian, over to you.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have official results from 2 of the completed races. Results still pending on the first Division I semifinal for the 8s. But in the second semifinal, official results, Southern California with a winning time of 6 minutes, 27.29 seconds. Ladies and gentlemen, we apologize for technical difficulties from the announce boat for this race. Once again, this is the first of two in the Division I second eights. In lane 1 is Princeton, lane 2 Ohio State, lane 3 California, lane 4 Yale, and lane 5 Harvard. The boat's just now coming into view at 1,000 meters. It looks to be Cal showing the way, as they have in 8 of their 9 races here in the spring season. Cal, the 2-time defending national champion, making their 9th appearance in the NCAA championships. Their second 8 showing the way. Ohio State and Yale battling it out for second, but the top 4 boats separated by less than a boat length as the crews head towards 1,500 meters to go. Correction, 500 meters to go, the 1,500 meter mark. As the crews pass 1,500 meters, it is Ohio State with just a seat lead on Cal. But once again, the top 4 boats all overlapping, all within a boat length. It continues to be Ohio State showing a slight lead on Cal, but the top 2 separated by less than a seat. When they passed by 1,500 meters, the top 3 were separated by less than a second. Now they head into the yellow-colored buoys, representing 250 meters to go, the final stretch for these crews. It is Ohio State and Cal, separated by less than a seat still. Yale running third, followed by Harvard. This could be another one of our photo finishes for today. Ohio State and Cal, 1-2. And as the crews cross the line, if you could hear the horn, less than a second and a half separating the top 3. And we'll await official results on that. And maybe another race that has to go to the videotape. And we will get set now for the second of 2 heats in the Division I second 8.
we have a start. Water really churning here as you see 40 oars going into and out of the water, bursting out of the starting gate at about 44 strokes per minute. It looks like most effective at that starting burst is University of Southern California as well as Washington. So the two Pac-10 crews may be getting a couple of seats advantage early on over the other three boats in this race. We often see a crew being a little more effective in the high stroke rating short bursts out of the gate. Other crews, though, might find a better pace or a better stride once they settle in to the racing cadence. Minnesota, right between the two Pac-10 crews, is in third place. They're only about 2 or 3 seats behind Washington and USC, which are rowing level together in first place. Then it's only another seat or so back to Tennessee, and then another couple of seats back to Notre Dame. So Washington and USC are applying the pressure on the field. Again, as we have mentioned, top 2 to go. So they would love to separate themselves from the other 3 crews. It's Minnesota that's most effective, rowing right between those 2 boats, staying right with them about 2 seats down. Check out the stroke rating for the Gophers first. They're at 37 strokes per minute. Go over to Washington now, and they're a little bit lower, 34.5 strokes per minute. About 136.5 is your time through the first 500 meters. And USC at 37.5. Really not much change. You have Washington and USC out ahead, although they're being joined now by Minnesota. Minnesota had been lurking about 2 seats down, and now they've made it 3 boats, dead even across. Those 3 crews have about 7 seats on Tennessee, and then Tennessee has almost a full length back on Notre Dame. The Washington coxswain just took a long look to her right, checked out Tennessee, a long look to her left, checked out the rest of the field, and what she is seeing is actually the stern post of the Minnesota crew as Minnesota has now gone into the lead. So that check to the left let her know that she was no longer in a dead heat for first, but Washington has fallen into second place behind Minnesota, with USC another seat behind in third. Tennessee is still hanging in there. Notre Dame looks to be out of touch with as far as a qualifying spot for the grand final, as they're a full length behind Tennessee. Well, Minnesota has been setting a real nice solid pace through the second 500 meters. It's gotten them now a 2 or 3 seat lead on Washington. Washington in turn is starting to put some distance between them and SC. SC is a half a length behind Washington, and Tennessee is coming up on the outside, looking to take third place away from USC. Well, we're getting to the 1,000-meter mark. Let's see what Washington's going to do as we hit the 1,000 in about 3:15.5. Washington is 2 to 3 seats down on Minnesota, but now they have the bow ball of the SC crew. I just saw the Washington coxswain sort of shake her hand or fist. I think maybe only the stern pair saw that. That might be the signal. Let's go, let's go, let's get back up to Minnesota. And whatever the move was, it's gotten a seat or 2. So it's gotten much tighter between the 2 leading crews, which is Minnesota and Washington. And the Minnesota coxswain's checking things out. She just called a counter move, looking right over her right shoulder, and she's back looking across at the 6th seat of Washington. Meanwhile, USC and Tennessee are about dead even, but they are, unfortunately, for qualifying for the grand final, now open water behind Washington. Well, I guess we don't want to make too many boxing references, but it's like punch and counter punch here. Minnesota with the latest counter punch over Washington's gotten them about 3 or 4 seats advantage again, but very clearly 1 and 2 for Minnesota and Washington. That would get those 2 boats into the grand final. 600 meters to go. Open water back to now 3rd place Tennessee, 4th place SC, 5th place Notre Dame. Again, Washington and Minnesota at this point look very comfortable as far as advancing to the grand final. Still, they would like to execute their race plan, and they'd like to get a good time relative to the previous repechage. And I'm sure Minnesota would like to say, look, we got you guys covered. You're not beating us today. Not going to beat us tomorrow either. At any rate, that strategy's working out. We've crossed the 500-meter mark. Minnesota is gradually extending their lead. Again, no danger whatsoever of these top two boats advancing. So it's just the issue of, is Minnesota going to continue in first place with Washington second, or might we see a reversal in the last 400 meters? Check out Washington's stroke rate, 36 strokes per minute. So that's high, but certainly not as high as they can go for the final sprint. 36 strokes per minute also. Minnesota, blades in together, out together, almost the exact same speed. That's fine for Minnesota because they've got a 3-seat advantage. One more time with the fist pump there by the Washington coxswain. One last, let's go, let's get back to Minnesota. Every time she does that, they get a couple of seats right off the bat, and it's just gotten really, really tight up here at the front of the pack. Through the 250-meter mark, and it's now dead level between Washington and Minnesota. I think Washington now has gone a seat ahead of Minnesota. Again, both these crews are going to advance, but they're putting on an exciting race here. We're going to go ahead and cover this all the way close to the line, but it's going to be something for the judge referees at the line to finally determine. But it is Washington coming up a seat ahead of Minnesota. Minnesota putting in one last charge. Tennessee holding on to third place, USC fourth, and Notre Dame fifth. We'll listen for the beeps at the line as it's between Washington and Minnesota for first and second. Washington with their last push here. Beep, beep. The Washington coxswain's hand goes up. I think a signal to her crew that she thinks they finished ahead. I would agree. Both crews, great race, and they'll do it again tomorrow, along with the 4 other grand finalists. Brian, back to you. USC in the middle of the race course has gotten the best of the first few starting strokes. But again, we usually have to get to the 100, 150 meter mark before we see any clear leaders and any clear trends in these races. So it's really almost about 4 boats across as they go through the 200 meter mark now. Ohio State, Harvard, Southern California, and Tennessee. But that's not meaning to imply that the other 2 crews are anything more than about, a seat or 2 down on that. Tennessee in lane 6, nearest the spectators, of course the host institution. They've shown good speed off the line all year long. They're continuing to do that here, but they're starting to come under pressure from the middle of the race course, Minnesota and Southern California. The reason those 2 crews are in the middle lanes is because they finished higher in their races to progress to the petite final. So Tennessee has dropped back into third as we continue to have Minnesota and USC dead level for first and second. And then it's pretty much a 3-boat tie between Ohio State, Harvard, and Notre Dame for 4th, 5th, and 6th. We're about to come up to the 500 meter mark. Not much of a change in the relative speed here, although Harvard is starting to get a little bit faster, 1 minute and 51 seconds through the 500 meter mark. And it looks like Harvard might be the crew to come up and challenge USC and Minnesota. While Harvard has been moving better, so has USC relative to Minnesota, and they've gotten 2 seats advantage. Well, Notre Dame has gotten themselves back into this pack pretty well, and now it looks like Ohio State that's maybe going to drop off. So it continues to be USC in first, couple of seats over the Golden Gophers of Minnesota, and then almost a dead heat, third, fourth, and fifth, with Harvard, Notre Dame, and Tennessee, and only a seat or two back of that to the Buckeyes of Ohio State. Well, and that's what you'd expect here in the finals, petite finals of the Division I fours. Really high-quality racing, good, tight racing. But it continues to be USC, and they're working really hard here to try and get some true separation, some true comfort level between themselves and Minnesota and the rest of the field. They're at 32.5 strokes per minute, and they've gotten maybe those 3 or 4 seats that they've had for a while and not much more. It continues to be Ohio State in 6th place. They're 2 seats behind Harvard in 5th, moving up to 4th place Notre Dame and 3rd place Tennessee, with now a few seats separating those 4 crews. So we're finally starting to see the pack separate. The head of the pack are the Trojans of Southern California. Here is a team after being here as an at-large 8 only last year. And they have been in control of this 4s race for much of the way. As we come up to the halfway point, they continue to be in control. They're going to cross through the 1,000-meter mark in about 3 minutes and 47 seconds. They're crossing ahead of Minnesota. Tennessee looks to be in 3rd place now, followed by Notre Dame in 4th, Harvard in 5th, Ohio State in 6th. Minnesota's advantage is only about 3/4 of a length over Tennessee as we look at 2nd and 3rd, 3 seats back to Notre Dame in 4th, another 3 seats back to Harvard in 5th, 2 seats back to Ohio State. Shifting our focus back to the leading Trojans, though, of USC. They're rowing very aggressively as they have throughout all of their races. They've brought the stroke rate up to 34 now. And in the process, they have gained almost a full length on Minnesota. Minnesota's scattering some geese from off the race course. I don't believe it affects their racing whatsoever. They're continuing in 2nd place, not quite a full length ahead of Tennessee. Tennessee's in 3rd, about a half a length over Notre Dame, which is right next to them. Notre Dame has just a couple of seats ahead of Harvard, and Ohio State has closed in on Harvard to be only about 1 seat behind them. Well, the USC coxswain can't really see that she has finally gotten an open water advantage in her boat over Minnesota. Minnesota not quite a full length ahead of Tennessee. Notre Dame still lingering a few seats behind them. And Ohio State is trying gamely to get back into Harvard. Harvard, though, continues to hold them off. Harvard's in 5th and Ohio State in 6th. Well, USC's not messing around. It took them a while to get what you might call firm control of the race, but they're at 33 strokes per minute. They have a little bit of open water. Of course, a length in a 4 is not worth quite as much as a length in an 8, but it's a comfortable lead. Very experienced women in all these crews, particularly in the USC boat. So they're not going to let anything go wrong here. And in fact, they've increased the intensity, and they're continuing to pull ahead of Minnesota. Minnesota at this point doesn't look like they're going to be challenged in the last 500 meters, holding on to a comfortable 2nd place. Tennessee continues in 3rd, maybe 4 seats ahead of Notre Dame. They're in turn almost a full length ahead of Harvard in 5th, with Ohio State 1 seat behind, where they've been for a long time now, in 6th place. So USC just pounding away, pulling ahead, pulling ahead, pulling ahead, and have great control here in the petite final. If things continue as they are, that would put them in 7th place overall. Minnesota's holding on to 2nd place. They're open water behind SC, but open water ahead of Tennessee. Tennessee hasn't really been able to pull any further ahead of Notre Dame. Looks like Notre Dame's starting to bring their stroke rate up. Last 250 meters now for the last 4 crews. The lead 2 crews are already well into the last 250. It's going to be SC taking this race and Minnesota taking 2nd. We continue to have Tennessee in 3rd, And it doesn't look like Notre Dame's going to be able to crack that. However, Ohio State now has just surged ahead of Harvard. So it's Ohio State finally. They've been trying for a long, long time, has gone into 5th, Harvard in 6th. And as the Trojans come to the line, they're going to take the flag for first place in the petite final. They're going to be followed by Minnesota, Tennessee, Notre Dame, Ohio State, and Harvard. That's your unofficial call from the announce boat. Brian, back over to you for more race results and lineups.
All right, official results from the Division II 8's grand final.
And there we have it. Underway here in the grand final of the 4s. Virginia going off the line strong, as are Yale and Washington. Brown, not typically the best of starters, though, right with that lead group. This is an awesome start. Actually, the Brown 4 through the 100-meter mark goes through first. So Brown, they know they have their hands full with Virginia, and vice versa, are being very aggressive, as is Virginia. Those are your two early leaders, with Brown 1 seat ahead of Virginia. Third place would be Washington, maybe another seat back to Yale, then maybe 2 seats back to Princeton, and then 2 more seats to California. Brown and Virginia, though, now going through the 250-meter mark, dead level. So Brown got the best start. Virginia, though, the best part of the settle, and all that has sorted themselves out to a dead heat so far for first and second. And the blades are going in and out at exactly the same time, so the same cadence for those two crews. That's 36 and a half strokes per minute. That's very aggressive in a 4s race, but these are two awesome crews, and they're able to handle it. There's 4 other great crews in here as well. Washington is in 3rd place right now, but they're almost a full length behind Virginia and Brown, which are setting the pace. And then it's level between Yale and Princeton for 4th and 5th, with Cal about a half a length back of that in 6th. Well, we're getting close to the 500-meter mark, and while Virginia did not have the best start, they've had the best settle as they go through in 1 minute and 48 seconds. A little bit of headwind now coming up, but they go through about 1 or 2 seats ahead of Brown. So it's Brown trailing Virginia now for the first time, but it's only about a seat or 2. They've actually gone open water ahead of the rest of the boats. Princeton is moving up on Washington. Washington is still in 3rd, but Princeton, on the complete other side of the race course, is putting them under pressure, trying to take 3rd place away. Yale has now slipped behind California, so Yale has gone into 6th, while California has gone up into 5th. Well, Virginia continues to be rowing just a little bit better than Brown, certainly nothing dominating yet. I know a lot of people look at the times from the heats. Virginia did not have the fastest winning time of the heats, but there was a little bit of shifting wind. Regardless of what that prognostication factor is, right now it's Virginia so far heading toward the fastest time here in the Division I 4s. So Virginia continuing to extend their lead over Brown. They're out to 2 or 3 seats advantage. It's still very tight. It's open water back to the next 4 crews, but those 4 crews are within 2 or 3 seats of each other. The order we'll call is Washington, Princeton, California, and Yale. But again, very, very close there. Yale slipped back into 6th, but, 20 strokes from now, they could be back into 3rd. That's how close it is. Similarly, it's still pretty close up at the front there, and there's about 3 to 4 seats advantage. Virginia continues to move away little by little. A lot of cheering coming from the sidelines. That's really helping these crews. Virginia is keeping their stroke rate up at 36 strokes per minute, past the halfway point, now almost a full length ahead of Brown. Well, Virginia's 4, I believe, has been undefeated all year and really barely challenged. They were winners of the South Central Region Regatta here 2 weeks ago, and they're showing no signs of weakness here today. Brown, again, very aggressively off the line. They know that Virginia is the crew that they have to mark and go after. They're still within a length of them, but not able to hold on to the strong pace being set by Virginia. Meanwhile, the next group of 4 is sorting themselves out, and they're sorting themselves out well in favor of California. Those are your defending team national champions, and the Cal crew has gone into 3rd place. They've passed their Pac-10 counterparts, Washington. Washington's in 4th, and Princeton is in 5th, and then it's 2 more seats back to Yale in 6th. So Cal, well, it doesn't look like they're going to have anything that's going to be able to handle the 2 leading boats. They've done a great job in consolidating the bronze medal position. Meanwhile, back out front, Virginia has gone to open water lead. I mean, that's really impressive. You're talking about 6 really powerful, strong, high-quality 4s here, and to have almost a length of open water, that says a lot about the quality of the Virginia 4. So they have a length of open water over Brown. Brown, in turn, has a little bit of open water over Cal. Cal has gotten themselves a full length over Washington, and actually now, for the first time, we're able to call Princeton going ahead of Washington. So Princeton has gone into 4th, Washington in 5th, Yale 3/4 of a length behind in 6th, where they have been for most of the race. But they are still within striking distance of Washington and perhaps Princeton as well. Less than 500 meters to go for your leaders. 2nd place has gone through. That's Brown. There goes Cal. 500 meters to go for them. Now we have Princeton, Washington, and Yale. Well, you can hear the Virginia crowd. They have a lot to cheer about, and that crew is just absolutely tearing it up here in the morning. They are going strong. They have 2 lengths of open water. This is a truly dominating performance by Virginia. They're going to get maximum points, of course, out of their 4 for the team championship. That bodes well for them. Brown wants to hang on to 2nd place. They're at 36.5 strokes per minute. They have to hold off Cal. Cal's been charging throughout the body of the race. They've gotten themselves into 3rd place. 4th place is Princeton. 5th place is Washington, but under pressure from Yale. Okay, it continues to be Virginia. We don't want to ignore them, but hey, they're going on to a great victory here. They're through the 250-meter mark. What we want to watch now is Brown, which is being challenged by California. 250 meters to go. Can Cal make up 3/4 of a length on Brown? Well, Brown's responding well now, and they've pushed it back out almost to a full length. So it's Virginia. They're in 1st, and we have Brown's going to be in 2nd. California holding on to 3rd. Princeton's done a great job of passing a couple of crews to go into 4th. It looks like Washington is going to hold on to 5th. Yale trying gamely to take that place away for him. Let's hear some great cheering. It's already been great. Let's hear some more cheering for that dominating Virginia crew as they go through the lines with a big win here in the Division I 4s. Brown looks like they're going to hold on to 2nd. California is going to come 3rd, followed by Princeton, Washington, and Yale, although we'll let things sort themselves out on the way to the line. Brian, back to you to set up the next exciting race.
All right, first we have results from the Division I 4 Petite Final.
As impressive and as powerful as the 6-4s going off the line were, it's even louder and more impressive to watch 6-8s churning the water here at the start, which we have underway. The referee's launches falling into place behind the crews. Of course, at the NCAA championships, we've yet to see anybody late to the line. We've yet to see a false start. We've yet to see equipment damage. We're through the 100-meter breakage zone. Everybody's continuing to row very well, no problems whatsoever. This quality of field, not much separation between the crews. As they're approaching the 250-meter mark, we'll see if we can sort something out. But as the bows surge back and forth, it's really difficult to pick out a true leader. But the closest we have to that is Yale in the middle of the race course in lane 4. On either side of them, though, is Tennessee and Harvard, and they're very close to them. Princeton is starting to fall off the pace. They're about 3/4 of a length behind the other 5 crews. Well, Yale's out to a deck length lead now, so it looks like they're going to start to really take control, while the other crews are going to try to prevent them from gaining that kind of control. Notre Dame is also starting to fall off the pace. They're in 5th, so it's the middle 4 crews that are really contesting things here. We go through the 500-meter mark in about 1 minute and 38 seconds, and it was Yale that went through first, followed by, well, it's really hard to tell here. I guess we'll call it Southern California in second, and then we'll look for Tennessee and Harvard virtually locked together behind them in 3rd and 4th. It continues to be Notre Dame in 5th and Princeton in 6th. Yale with about 3 to 4 seats advantage now, but it's USC that's providing the greatest challenge to them. They're the 3 or 4 seat crew down in 2nd place, and then 2 seats back to Harvard in 3rd, and only another seat back to Tennessee in 4th. Notre Dame and Princeton still have overlap, or maybe bow to stern on Yale, so they're certainly not out of it. We're through the 750-meter mark. Their leading crew from the New Haven, Connecticut area. Yale continues to row very strongly, but USC is putting a very aggressive charge, and they've drawn to within 1 seat of Yale. So Yale got their bow out finally in front, got themselves a few seat advantage. USC, though, has responded, and now here goes Yale counterattacking on them. Yale's at 37 strokes per minute, back out to a 3-seat advantage. The Trojans of USC are at a lower stroke rating, so perhaps they might have more speed as we get into the second half of the race. Harvard's in 3rd. They're only 2 seats ahead of Tennessee. Princeton's in 5th. Notre Dame back into 6th. Well, Yale goes through the 1,000-meter mark in good fashion. Still out 3 or 4 seats now on USC. But USC is not backing off, and it looks like they're putting a move on here. USC doing a great job. They've been hanging on to Yale, and I think they're about to take the lead away from Yale, and yes, they have. I mentioned they were at a little lower stroke rating, and they might have more for the second half of the race, and boy, do they have a lot here in the second half of the race. Not only have they taken the lead away, they've taken a lot of lead. They're out almost a half a length over Yale. That's a tremendous move. It sounds easy sitting out here to call it, going from a seat or 2 down to 3 or 4 seats ahead, but it's much harder, obviously, to do that, especially against a quality field like this. So it's USC now, your leaders. 2nd place goes to Yale. Tennessee is now taking 3rd place. Harvard is in 4th, Princeton in 5th, and Notre Dame in 6th. Well, the USC Trojans really showing a strong move through the 1,000-meter mark. Got them a big advantage over Yale. They're continuing to move away a little bit. Their stroke rate's up to 35. They should be able to handle that and then some as we come into the last 600 meters of the race. Well, what's Yale going to do? At this point, they still have to worry, of course, about holding on to 2nd place in this race because Tennessee's on one side of them and Harvard's on the other side of them. Those 2 crews are virtually level. And, of course, they'd still like to take that lead back from USC. So Yale trying to pressure the leaders, USC Trojans and trying to stave off a hard charge which is coming from Tennessee. Harvard has slipped a few seats behind them in the 4th. Harvard almost a full length over Princeton in 5th. Notre Dame in 6th. 450 meters to go, where the Trojans, now that they've got the lead, they can really smell the finish line, and they are going for it. They continue to extend their lead. That's got to be a great feeling to have said, we've got our race plan. We know when we're going. Wait for it. Here it is, 1,000-meter mark. Power up, stroke rate up, move on out. Well, the Trojans are continuing to lead, but it's Yale coming under severe pressure now by the local, the homestanding University of Tennessee Lady Volunteers, only 1 seat down. They want to take second place away from Yale. It continues to be not quite a full-length lead for the SC Trojans. Yale under severe pressure by Tennessee. They've been able to distance themselves from 4th place Harvard, 5th place Princeton, 6th place Notre Dame. The real race now is going to be between Yale and Tennessee. Yale clinging to the lead, and Tennessee now ahead. Tennessee now ahead. So it's USC in first. Tennessee has finally gone into second. Yale's going to be able to hold on to third, but it doesn't look like they have a response for Tennessee's sprint. Harvard in 4th, Princeton 5th, 6th place to Notre Dame. Tennessee charging to the line behind USC. They're not going to be able to take first place away from the Trojans, I don't believe. It's USC, Tennessee, Yale, your top 3 crews. Great racing there, and that was just the petite final. What are we going to see next? Brian's going to set that up for you with lane assignments and crew assignments, crew seating order.
First official results from the Division I 4 Grand Final.
And there you have it. All crews underway. The grand final here for the Division I Second Eights. Well, we'll see who wants to have the aggressive race plan, load it, try and get out in the first 500 meters. Again, Brown certainly tried that in their 4, only to succumb eventually to Virginia. Here in the 8, it looks like a very similar race plan, as a bit uncharacteristically, it's a Brown boat first off the line. So obviously they've been focusing and concentrating on their starts to good effect. It's Brown in first and Minnesota in second early on. But again, all crews within 3 seats of each other as we go through the 250-meter mark. Well, Virginia has managed to hold Brown fast start to within a seat or 2, as has Minnesota, and actually as has California. So those are your 4 boats that are within 3 feet of each other, 1, 2, 3, and 4. We still, though, have Washington and Ohio State in the thick of things as well. They're in 5th and 6th, but only a few seats back of this lead group. Well, Brown is yet to give up the lead, but Minnesota or Virginia might be the crew that takes it away from them, as well as California. So it continues to be Brown, Virginia, Minnesota, and California in that order, but all within a couple of feet of each other. Ohio State is in 5th, and Washington is in 6th. We're through the 500-meter mark, and boy, there's not much going on with those lead crews. Nobody's able to gain an inch. And as I said that nobody was able to gain an inch. Well, Virginia is proving me wrong, as they are putting on a strong move here, and they have gone ahead of Brown. And maybe a little bit more of a case of Brown paying for that fast start, as California has gone through them as well. So Cal's in second, and Brown has slipped back into third. Actually, Minnesota has gone by now as well. So Brown from first to fourth in the course of about 20 strokes. Well, and this Minnesota crew, they're out here in lane 6, and there's certainly no disadvantage to being in that lane, and no reason that just because they took second in the repechage to get here that they can't win the whole thing. And they, I believe, are about to go ahead of Virginia. So Minnesota on the outside, Virginia in the middle, Cal on the other side. Those are your lead 3 crews. Brown is half a boat length to 3/4 of a boat length behind them in 4th. Then it's another 4 seats back to Ohio State, and Washington is in 6th. While Virginia, California, and Minnesota almost bow ball to bow ball as we have a little over 1,000 meters to go in the race. Brown, since they've slipped back into 4th, really haven't lost too much more ground, nor has Ohio State or even Washington. But boy, the 3 lead crews, and we now do have a clear and new leader for the first time, Minnesota. They go through in 3 minutes and 26 seconds, and they are just pounding through the field. They've gone ahead, they continue to go ahead, and they already have now 4 to 5 seats on Virginia, and they're continuing to move. Their coxswain at the top of her lungs is screaming, "Give it all you've got, give it all you've got." Well, Minnesota's given a heck of a lot, and it's gotten them 6 seats over Virginia. Virginia holding on to 2 seats over California in 3rd. Brown, they're starting to come back. They had sort of drifted off into 4th place. They're coming back into a stronger 4th place position. But boy, that Minnesota crew sure is responding to their coxswain. And right now we're just hearing the coxswain yell, "I've got their bow seat. I've got their bow seat." She's talking about Virginia's bow seat. So that's an 8-seat lead for Minnesota and continuing to move a little bit at a time. Minnesota with a very aggressive middle thousand. They've shown that in a lot of their races here this weekend in all their boat categories. They're at about 35 strokes per minute, as is Virginia. Virginia is maintaining a couple of seats over California. That's your 3rd place crew right now. Brown is in 4th. Ohio State in 5th, not looking really to challenge at this point. Washington in 6th. Speaking of not challenging, I don't know that anybody's going to be able to challenge the Minnesota crew in the last 500 meters. I didn't hear the coxswain, but I'm sure she's told her boat, "Hey, I've got their bow ball." So they're continuing to move out ahead in lane 6, closest to the spectators. And California is about to take 2nd place away from Virginia. 500 meters, 5:12. And it's California going ahead 2nd, Virginia 3rd, Brown 4th. It's going to be Ohio State crossing in 5th, Washington in 6th. Well, your 2 direct qualifiers are right now in 3rd and 4th place, as Minnesota now has to look all the way across to the other side and wonder, wow, is Cal going to be able to take anything away from us or not? Well, Minnesota, they're staying composed, staying very strong, very long. They don't show any signs of weakening here. They're at 35 strokes per minute, as they have been for a while. Cal and Virginia, Cal has about 2 seats over Virginia now. Virginia still 5 seats over Brown. And then it's a full length back to Ohio State, and then a few more seats back to Washington. Well, Minnesota, 250 meters to go. They're here as a team for the first time, and they look like they might take away their first individual event gold medal here in the second 8. I don't think that that's going to be anything but true. Look at Minnesota pouring it on. The coxswain took another check. She's still got a length lead over California. California in turn with 3 or 4 seats over Virginia. And here comes Brown. Here comes Brown. They've been in 4th. Look at that sprint that Brown is putting on. They're coming up level with Virginia for 3rd place. It's going to be Minnesota going across the line in 1st. Cal is in 2nd, but a hard-charging Brown is going to take 3rd place away from Virginia. That could have a big impact on the team points. Virginia struggling to respond. There goes Minnesota, California barely ahead of Brown, and then Virginia. That's unofficial, of course. Wow. And we still have 3 more races to go. Brian, we'll let you set that up. And we are underway. Coxswains urging their crews on, reminding their crews to breathe. You don't want to hold your breath through the starting sequence. That's not going to bode the rest of the race. They're through the 100-meter mark. Still pretty close, but UCLA has nudged their bow ahead. They've been a fast starting crew for much of the year, trying to continue with that theme today at 43.5 strokes per minute. University of Central Florida is in second place, a couple of seats behind them, one more seat back to Washington and California. So UCLA out early to about a 3-seat advantage, but Cal is moving pretty well now and has gone into second place and is actually only 2 seats behind UCLA. So it's UCLA early, followed by California, Washington, and then the University of Central Florida. UCLA holding on to their lead, but it's only a couple of feet over California. 38 strokes per minute still in the leading UCLA crew. We'll get a stroke rate for Cal as well. They continue to be just a couple of feet down. They're at 36.5 strokes per minute. Those two crews have a half a length on Washington, which in turn has 2 seats over the University of Central Florida. As we described that, Cal has gone ahead of UCLA. So California are your new leaders, 500 meters in about 1 minute and 36 seconds. So that shows just a little bit of a wind, adding maybe a second or two to each 500 meters. So it's California in first, UCLA in second, Washington in third, Central Florida in fourth. Again, California's lead is now 2 seats over UCLA. They have half a length over Washington, and Washington only a couple of seats over Central Florida, with Central Florida moving. California continues to creep ahead a little bit. They're still at 35 or 36 strokes per minute. UCLA trying to hang with them, trying to shed themselves of Washington and also Central Florida, about 36.5 strokes per minute for the Bruins. They're losing a little bit more ground on California, as California has now a 6-seat advantage, but UCLA is pulling ahead of Washington, and they're up to 7 seats on Washington. So it looks to be a little bit California pulling away from UCLA, but UCLA also pulling away from Washington. Central Florida is 6 seats down in 4th place. Well, California, they were not out of the gate the fastest, but they've been very strong from about the 250-meter mark on. But they're still just clinging to the 6 seats over UCLA. So the creep ahead isn't really happening anymore. Still not quite to the 1,000-meter mark yet. UCLA is at 36. California is at 35. They continue to be your lead too. And we have 3 minutes and 20 seconds to the halfway point. Well, California now has gone back into creep ahead mode, and they've got a full 8 seats on UCLA. It might be a little bit more than creep as they're continuing to pull up. UCLA consolidating their lead of 6 or 7 seats over Washington. Washington now, for the first time, getting almost a full length on Central Florida. Well, California is looking very, very strong out in the lead. Their move through the 1,000 has gotten them some separation over UCLA. Open water now. Looking very strong, still holding right around 35 strokes per minute. The California coxswain just took a long look over at UCLA, so she knows exactly what her deficit is, and what her advantage is, and that's open water advantage. UCLA's coxswain is looking almost directly across at the bow seat of Washington, and Washington in turn has a length on Central Florida. Well, UCLA has whittled away the open water deficit and is back to bow to stern, or perhaps even a little bit of overlap. We still have 1,600 meters to go, so maybe about 2 minutes to go. You can hear the UCLA crowd cheering, saying, "You can do it." Well, let's see if they can take a length back on California in the last 550 meters. If they can't do that, then California is going to win this third level final. Meanwhile, while UCLA is trying to pull off that feat, they're continuing to hold off Washington by less than a length, but more than 8 seats. And 500 meters to go, just under 5 minutes and 4 seconds for the for the Bears of California. The Bruins of UCLA are in second. The Huskies are in third. University of Central Florida is in fourth. Well, as much as the cheers of the UCLA fans were trying to encourage them to close that gap and get ahead of California, I don't think they're going to be able to pull that off, as California has pulled out to more of an open water advantage. This is the biggest lead that they've had throughout the entire race. There's 400 meters to go, perhaps 350 meters to go. UCLA, in turn, though, has their largest advantage over Washington, and that would be pretty much on their bow marker. And then Central Florida continues in fourth. So California, since taking control of the race, they left it a little bit in doubt, but I don't think it's in doubt anymore with 250 meters to go. California is in a solid first place position. UCLA solidly in second. Washington in third, about 7 seats behind them. Then Central Florida, open water behind. Well, we have seen one amazing sprint coming out of the Bruins' second varsity. Let's see if Washington can pull that off over UCLA. Neither of those crews are going to overtake California. UCLA comes up into their sprint sequence. Washington doing the same. Washington might be moving a little bit, but it's not going to be enough, as it's going to be California across the line in first place. UCLA is going to come across in second. Washington's going to be in third, and the University of Central Florida is going to be in fourth. Washington making one last burst here. Cal's across. UCLA, Washington, and they'll be followed by Central Florida. Brian, we'll let you set things up for the petite final, which is the next race. And we are underway this time, and every indication is that there were no problems with alignment or anything else. So here we go. The petite final, Division I, first 8. And early on, could have guessed this one, it's Tennessee out in front. Okay, so the host institution, University of Tennessee, the Volunteers, they've been fast off the blocks in virtually every race all week long. Pacing them, though, a few lanes away from them, is Stanford from the Pac-10. And actually now Stanford has put their bow ball in front, Tennessee in second, but Dartmouth is right with them, as are the other 3 crews for that matter. So maybe about 3 seat separation between the whole field, but it's Stanford putting their imprint on this race now. So it's Stanford in first, Dartmouth in second, Tennessee in third. We'll call Notre Dame in fourth, and Harvard in fifth, and Minnesota in sixth. And in fact, I can just hear the Minnesota coxswain right next to us making essentially the same call to her crew. Boy, it's Dartmouth and Stanford right next to each other. Lanes 1 and 2, they are the leaders now. They have about 3 seats over Tennessee. And then in between those crews, you have Notre Dame. 5th place going to Harvard at this point in time, 6th place to Minnesota. But again, a very tightly packed group, about 1 minute, 35 seconds through the first 500 meters. Beautiful racing conditions here. Crews are just right on the pace that they want to be. No problems whatsoever. 35.5 strokes per minute for Dartmouth, which is now edged out in front of Stanford. So it's Dartmouth that has gone into first place, Stanford in second, Tennessee continues in third. They're about a seat ahead of Notre Dame, and now Minnesota has come up to take 5th place away from Harvard, but that's only by a seat as well. Again, between first place, which is Dartmouth, and 6th place, which is Harvard, there are 8 seats of separation. So 8 seats from the front of the field to the back of the field with 1,250 meters to go. Well, Dartmouth is looking like they're going to be strongest here in the second 500 as they're continuing to pull out ahead of Stanford. Dartmouth has gained another seat, so they have almost half a length now on Stanford. 35 strokes per minute continues to be their stroke rate. Boy, and it's getting just closer and closer and closer behind them as Minnesota, which put on a great charge with their second 8, is putting on a tremendous charge here as well. They've come up almost level with Tennessee, as has Notre Dame. They're still behind both Dartmouth and Stanford by a handful of seats. And let me tell you, it's only another seat or 2 back to Harvard. So as we come up to the halfway point here in about 3 minutes and 17 seconds, it's a real strong race from Dartmouth, but nothing comforting as Stanford has come back on them. It was 4 seats. It's now just a couple of seats. So Stanford taking a strong move here through the 1,000-meter mark, as is Minnesota. Minnesota is in third, looking to take second place away from Stanford, but they still have a handful of seats to accomplish that. Well, Dartmouth let a little bit of their lead slip away, but they've consolidated it now at about 2 or 3 seats. Those 2 lead crews, Dartmouth and Stanford, really have not been able to shed themselves of the other 4 boats. So it's Minnesota in 3rd place, Tennessee in 4th, Notre Dame in 5th, Harvard in 6th, just tossing about a seat or seat and a half between each of those 4 crews. Look just a few seats ahead of them to second place Stanford, a few more seats ahead of them to first place Dartmouth. This is a really awesome race that we're having here. All these crews maintaining around a 35 to 36 strokes per minute pace. Very little movement between them. As you've heard, just a couple of seats back and forth. Really nothing has changed in the last 30 seconds or so, which is why I haven't said anything about any change in order. Although now it looks like Harvard might be able to go past Notre Dame and go into 5th place. Well, Dartmouth is coming up with about, I don't know now, a 4-seat lead over Stanford. Both those crews better watch out for Minnesota. Lane 6 is treating the Gophers really well as they're charging hard. They've had to work back from 5 or 6 seats down. They're only now a couple of seats down on Stanford. They want to match their counterparts in the second 8 with a real strong finish, overtaking some crews and getting first to the line. All right, continues to be Dartmouth leading this petite final. And it's Stanford in 2nd, Minnesota challenging in 3rd, Tennessee is in 4th, Notre Dame is in 5th, Harvard is in 5th as they've gone ahead of Notre Dame, which is in 6th place. We're coming up on the last 250 meters. It continues to be Dartmouth, Stanford, Minnesota, but Tennessee putting a big charge on. Coming into the last 50 seconds, 45 seconds of this race. We'll continue to call it as we go back to try and pick up as much of the grand final as we can. This one's definitely going to come down to some referees' judgment calls anyhow. It continues to be Dartmouth leading, pulling a little bit further ahead of Stanford. Look for lanes 1 and 6 as it's Stanford and Minnesota battling it out for 2nd and 3rd place. Coming down to the last 150 meters of the petite final. Fantastic racing. Dartmouth doing a great job. We're going to have to let Brian give you guys the official results as we head back up for the final race of the regatta.
And if you could hear the horns, 4 horns within 1 second of each other.
And there you have the final dramatic attention go command of the weekend. The crews are underway. Again, we're at about the 300-meter mark, waiting for these crews to get up to us. Boy, everybody's off the line in great fashion. We'll take an early stroke rate on USC first as they're surging at about 40 strokes per minute. And let's see what happens with Yale. They're maybe one beat higher. In the semifinal, Yale just went out, got a length like nobody's business, and just decimated the field. So far, though, they're not able to do that. It's Yale in first and SC in second. And as the crews come up to us, we're able to get a better look now. And it's Virginia going with them. So first, second, and third, we'll call it Yale, SC, and Virginia. But only 2 seats separating those crews and another 2 seats for the other 3 crews. So it looks like Yale trying to replicate their strategy from yesterday. But instead of getting a huge lead, all they've been able to do is get about 2 feet over the University of Southern California. And then it's another couple of feet back to Virginia and Brown. They're pretty much dead level for third and fourth. And then you have Ohio State and Princeton right in the thick of things as well. Coming up to the 500-meter mark in about 1:34. It's a nice, quick first 500 meters. Yale inching ahead a little bit now of USC. They've got maybe a seat or 2. USC was under pressure in both their qualifying heat as well as their semifinal. They showed a lot of resilience. Let's see what they show here in the final. Virginia out in lane 6. We've seen repeatedly this afternoon there's no disadvantage to being in lane 6. Virginia's turning it into their advantage as they've come up now almost into second place. But it's Yale beginning to get more and more control of the race. That's your undefeated Eastern Sprint champion and Ivy League champion from New Haven, Connecticut. And as we're about to hit the 750-meter mark, Yale has about 3 seats over now Virginia, and then a seat or 2 back to USC. And then we have Ohio State and Brown in 4th and 5th. And Princeton is falling a few seats off the pace in 6th. Well, Yale does have the lead, but it's nowhere near as comfortable as what they had in their semifinal. It's about a half a length over Virginia and USC, which are almost dead level. Brown maybe a seat behind USC, along with Ohio State. The Buckeyes looking real strong there. Haven't called them all that much, but Ohio State might be about to take 3rd place. So Ohio State just sort of, riding the surge here. We're getting close to the 1,000-meter mark. Let's see who's got to move on either side of this line. Ohio State at 34. That's a bit low. Maybe they have room to come up. And there you have your leaders, Yale going across, then Virginia. It's almost too close to call after that between Ohio State, USC, and Brown, with Princeton in 6th place. Well, Virginia's taking a move. The coxswain urging them to drive. That's about the way she's saying it. It's Yale, though, that continues to maintain their lead, followed by Virginia. But Ohio State, the Buckeyes are on the move here. They've been on the move for the last couple of 100 meters. They may be able to take 2nd place away from UVA. Speaking about on the move and taking places away, look at Brown. So it's Brown, Ohio State, Virginia, USC, 4 across for 2nd place. It's Yale in front, watching all that battling take place behind them. And it's Ohio State that has gone into 2nd place. There's that patented Buckeye move through the middle of the race. Virginia's in 3rd, barely ahead of Brown, barely ahead of USC. Princeton continues in 6th place. Well, Yale was not under pressure in the semifinal, but talk about pressure all around them. 2 crews on either side. Look at Ohio State put it on. Look at Brown put it on. Yale put a lot of effort into getting their early lead. They're down to a 2-seat advantage. Are they going to be able to respond as all these other crews come up on them? Yale bravely up to 37.5 with 550 meters still to go. Hey, that move is working. They've got a couple of seats back. Way to go, Yale, responding. Ohio State in 2nd, barely ahead of Brown. And then you have Virginia just behind them and Princeton. 500 meters to go. Yale, Ohio State, Brown, Virginia, SC, they're so close together I couldn't possibly call it as they came across the line. They're all within a second and a half of each other. Here comes Ohio State. Ohio State looking for their best finish ever. They're in second place. Still, though, a few seats behind Yale. Let's see if Ohio State can do anything. We saw Brown's second 8 have one amazing sprint at 41 strokes per minute earlier in the day. Maybe their first 8 has that same ability. It's already 37.5 strokes per minute in Ohio State. Yale just sitting pretty, calm, cool, collected. 300 meters to go. This is close racing, but they're ahead, and they're moving further ahead. Speaking of Brown, here comes their move. They might be able to take second place away from Ohio State. It's SC in fourth, Virginia in fifth, Princeton in sixth. I don't know if anybody's going to have a move to match Yale's as they're going further ahead. That's an amazingly well-rode race by Yale. It's a good one by Ohio State as well. But here comes Brown. I don't think anybody's going to catch Ohio State. I don't think anybody's going to catch Yale, but it's Ohio State barely holding on to second place over Brown. We're going to take you as close to the line as we can. It continues to be Yale, Ohio State, and Brown. And it's maybe a little bit now more of an advantage for Ohio State over Brown. Here comes SC. They're challenging Brown. We're going to have to back off here so we don't interfere with the photo finish. It is going to be Yale, your national champions, in the first 8, and it's going to be beep, beep, beep for second, third, and fourth. I want to say Brown, SC, and then Ohio State, but that's terribly unofficial. Please don't anybody celebrate or get disappointed based on my guess from a few meters behind the line.